Welcome to Transformative Principal, where you learn how to be a leader and not just a manager of a to-do list. I am your host, Jethro Jones. You can find me on Twitter at Jethro Jones. Your to-do list is a hungry monster that is never satisfied. For the last year and a half, I've helped principals get awards, get promoted, and find the time to do the work that really matters. I recently opened a new mastermind slot. Schedule a call with me and let's overcome the stressed and isolated principal position together. Go to the show notes for this episode at transformativeprincipal.org and click Schedule a Call with Jethro. Welcome to Transformative Principal. I am excited to have Adam Fachler on the program. Adam, welcome to Transformative Principal. Happy to have you.
Oh, thank you for having me, Jethro. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, no problem. So I am excited to talk to you because a lot of times in education, we as teachers, we have this plan for how we're going to do lessons and how we're going to teach kids. And sometimes it rocks and sometimes it drops and it's just not great at all. And so you've got this great method that you use to teach teachers how to transform their planning so they create amazing lessons. Can you walk us through your Empower method and tell us a little bit about that?
Absolutely. I mean, you nailed it right on the head with what the main problem is. I mean, I think so many of us, whether we become alternatively certified through a program or even if we go through a traditional teacher's college, it's really hard to square sometimes all the theory and all the templates and the graphic organizers that are supposed to sort of teach us how to teach. And so it's almost like there's this conversation that we're not having where what does your lesson plan look like or what does your unit plan look like? When we don't have a roadmap, of course, it's really hard to get where we're going. So like I'm sure a lot of your listeners, when I started teaching middle school, 7th and 8th grade, English language arts, I was always looking and reading, like I must have spent, 75% of whatever didn't go to rent in my small New York City apartment most definitely went to like the education library that I was trying to build and amass in my mind. I'm sure a lot of your listeners can relate to that. So
teachers pay teachers is a huge business.
Yeah, that's absolutely right. Like we're all searching. And so that's actually another good point. I mean, with teachers pay teachers, I mean, look, I love sharing resources. And of course, I love the concept of educators empowered to become entrepreneurs and sell their wares. The issue sometimes with teachers pay teachers is there's really no quality control. And so I think, of course, you love teachers and educators sharing resources and being empowered to even become entrepreneurial and share their expertise with fellows and even get paid to do so. The challenges with teachers pay teachers is that there's no quality control. And so you're not sure whether what you're downloading has gotten 5 stars because it was a great worksheet in a jiffy, or whether it's actually a high quality, resource that is going to, get the impact that you want and the engagement that you want with your students. So the Empower method sort of was born out of all this inquiry and a way of just systematizing highly effective education that engages every learner in the room.
Yeah, that's awesome. And one last thing about that teachers pay teachers thing. So the way that I teach, like it starts with a mindset of the learner does the work, not the teacher. And so like even that piece is not shared equally among all educators. And so the idea that I can either go find something that I would actually be able to use on teachers pay teachers, or that I can go sell something myself on teachers pay teachers is, that or any other place, that's one of the real challenges for me is that I don't approach learning in the same way that most teachers do. And so, with an inquiry driven lesson where you start with a problem and then work through to a solution, there's more of that coming out now. There's some great books like I think it's AJ Giuliani who does the design thinking book. I might have had that wrong, but anyway, there's someone who wrote a design thinking book that I love that I forgot the author's name, but sorry, whoever. But yeah, they're doing more of that kind of thing. But like just grabbing a worksheet for me isn't really going to be something beneficial because, like you said, the quality control is just not there, and that's where we need something that helps us make better decisions in planning. And so like our audience is principals, and that's mostly who's listening to this. But what I want to be able to talk about is how when a principal has an understanding of this empower method, they can then teach that to their teachers and help them learn it so that they can get what they want as the principal out of the lessons when they're going and doing observations. And I think that that's just a side tangent piece that we just want to keep in mind. So let's go ahead and talk about what the Empower Method stands for and what it means.
Absolutely. Well, so I love that you brought up inquiry-based learning, because that's really what we're trying to make a little bit less messy here. We're trying to take inquiry, which is how learning happens in the real world, through apprenticing people into different ways of thinking and asking them and teaching them how to ask the right questions. And I think that like that process of design can become really messy and unwieldy. And I just know that from experience. So Empower effectively just keeps inquiry-based learning on the rails. And so what it stands for, E, is envision the destination. And so that's all manner of setting really powerful goals, deciding what the deliverables will be for the unit of instruction, and then deciding on measures of success or quality criteria that we'll be sort of aiming for as we develop expertise throughout the unit. So it's E, and then it's M. M is map the path to mastery. So after you envision the destination for your learners, that's really where the most challenging intellectual work takes place. And I'm talking about for educators as well as instructional leaders, because with the Empower method, you're learning one methodology, but it scales. So it works with students in a classroom. It works with adult learners in a professional development or staff development. And it really works for, anyone teaching anyone anything. So Map the Path to Mastery is this familiar process where you kind of have to like get into it. So I always say you need to do the task that you're assigning to your learners. So if you're expecting your teachers to implement, let's say, a specific kind of instructional technique or unit plan, you kind of have to go and do that learning yourself so that you can go the way, know the way, so that you can show the way. During Map the Path to Mastery, we're also, breaking down a complicated task into little subtasks. We're also thinking about the mental model. So let's say, well, for example, Empower is a mental model. It's a simple acronym that simplifies what can otherwise be a complex process. When I was teaching my students argument in the classroom, I used to teach them the mental model CREW: claim, reason, evidence, and warranting. And through learning that vocabulary, sort of seeing how it played out in arguments across the spectrum, they really developed a flexible, transferable way of thinking about it. So, okay, you're an educator or you're a leader. You've envisioned a destination. You know where you want your learners to go. You've mapped the path out. You sort of know the milestones and the journey and the timeline. Okay, now you have to really think about the learner-facing actions. And that is manifested in a power plan. So that P stands for priming, that O stands for orienting, that W stands for walkthrough, the E is explore, and the R is reflect. And I'm going to go into really quickly what each of those stands for. Priming is where you activate prior knowledge. It's where you elicit the emotional aspects of the learning. Maybe you'll ask controversial questions. Maybe you'll give your learners a survey or an opinionaire just to see where they stand on the learning right now. So for example, if I were with a bunch of educators or leaders thinking about Empower, I would probably want to start off not with, hey, here's Empower. I'd probably want to start off with something like, how do you currently approach your curriculum design and unit planning? Do you use any tools? Tell me about those. What challenges do you face? Really eliciting from the learners what their current experience is with this problem. Orient the learning is then when you say, for that problem, there is a solution, and here's what it looks like. Again, we're really focusing on the investment during these stages. The traditional teaching doesn't even really begin until the walkthrough. The walkthrough is where you model and demonstrate and mentor. All manner of guided practice happens in this phase, all in preparation for students exploring new territory, which is a performance task, a transfer opportunity, something that pushes students undeniably outside of their comfort zone, whether they are kids or adults. And then at every stage of the journey, sort of the engine that's driving us the whole time is the final R, reflect on the journey. And that's where you summarize what you've learned, how you've learned it, you self-assess and engage in all manner of metacognition as you set next steps. And so what you have right there is an acronym with two parts that happen behind the scenes, Envision and Map, and then a 5-part, no-fail, proven process that aligns with all the cognitive research, all the theory, and most importantly, real teacher practice that sort of results in crazy levels of transfer and engagement in the classroom. And I'm just been, honestly, I've been most happy about it as a user, because I feel like I have got this thing that has made my teaching life. And I teach teachers for a living. I teach coaches, instructional coaches, and principals and superintendents. And I've always struggled with, like, how am I going to actually script what I need to do and build what I need to build? This has just been so helpful, and I'm really excited to share it with a wider audience.
Yeah. So, in addition to my principal duties this year, I have the opportunity through my church to teach early morning seminary to kids, which high school kids, which is 6:30 to 7:20 in the morning, and nobody wants to be there during that time.
That's a tough part. Tough.
Yeah. So I've actually used the Empower method to do that, and I'm going to talk a little bit about that as like a real fresh teaching experience in my mind, because it has made an impact. And so that envision piece and the mapping piece, in those, it sounds like the way that you described it, like it's a lot of work. As in, each lesson I prepare, I'm going to have to spend at least that much time going through and doing it myself. And talk a little bit about that, because I felt like before I did it, like that's what it was going to be, and that my class is 50 minutes and I needed that extra time. Like I needed to book an hour and a half to do all my planning. And it actually didn't take that long. So talk a little bit about how you shortcut that process so that you're not actually like, if you're teaching 5 classes in a day, you're not going to spend 10 hours the day before preparing. That's just not going to work. How do you work that process?
No, you bring up a really interesting point with obviously the time that it takes to do these things. What's interesting is that when you look outside of the United States to a country like, for example, Japan, and you look at the time that teachers get to plan, it almost like matches the amount of time that they get to actually teach students in the classroom. And so there are definitely some places that have keyed into how most of the, whether you win the day in your classroom or your staff room, most of that is decided well before you enter. It is really like the planning is everything. It's the foundation of what you do. So a couple of things. One, when you do this at the unit level, you set yourself up for a much easier month or 6 weeks or 8 weeks ahead, because you have front loaded a lot of the work. And so what I'd say is it's not a time cost. It's a time investment, because you are paid back dividends. You get your weekends back. And I would say that the other thing is that for both Envision, Map, Prime, Orient, Walkthrough, et cetera, what we're trying to do is give you exercises and templates, because you're making the same kinds of decisions over and over again. So for example, when we're envisioning the destination, something that I help educators learn is to crystallize your learning target or your learning outcome in a gem, trying to be a little bit cutesy, because if it rhymes or if it's an acronym, people can remember it. That's the marketing side of me talking. So crystallize your learning outcome in a gem. And GEM stands for goal, evidence, and measure of success. And so now that you've got goal, evidence, measure, and success, if you look into the book, and you know what, frankly, I'm just going to probably send all these things out to your listeners for being good listeners. All of these templates with sample goals, sample evidence, and sample measures of success, it really paves the way for people becoming not only better at teaching in the classroom, but they become better planners just by using the framework. And that was really what we were after in the first place. Like, how could you turn the active instructional planning into a kind of deliberate practice, into something that you could really get expert at over time just by using the framework.
Yeah, I think that that's fantastic, and that advice of doing it at the unit level is really powerful, because then you're not talking about what you want to get out of each lesson, but you look at it at a bigger chunk, so that if they don't get every little piece for each lesson, what you want them to get at the end, and that is really important. So on an administrative level, so when I want my teachers to rethink how we're doing interactions with kids relating to disciplinary procedures, for example, I want them to see the child as a child first and as someone who broke the rules second. And so when that's my bigger goal, then the way that I walk them through that throughout the course of a whole entire year of working with them is different than if I want them to get that out of one training. And so it allows for those long-term conversations, those learning opportunities. When that goal is clear, then that's when it helps you make that the power part work a lot better, because you're looking for that singular goal, rather than just saying, well, today we want to learn how to identify the positive things. Okay, well, that's great, but that's a little too short. So then in my early morning seminary stuff, the thing that I learned with them is, I want them to become spiritual people. And some of them are already there and some of them are not there. But looking at that as a whole, that makes it a lot easier when I have individual conversations to help put them on the right path rather than go later. So I think that's a great example.
I get really excited when people start to use the language sort of, I don't want to say like colloquially, but almost like naturally. Like, you're thinking about your seminary school, and you are sort of like a pastor shepherding your followers towards living this rich life. And like you really are envisioning a destination that is a little off in the distance for them. Like you're saying, they might not be spiritual people today, but we're going to get there. And because I assume that you have adopted a lot of the practices that you preach into your life, that's mapping the path to mastery. And so even in your simple example of helping the educator see the child first, what was your formulation again?
So you see the child as a child first, not as someone who broke the rules first.
And so to me, that's the mental model. Like that's a principle that's generative. In other words, I can take that phrase, which you could fit onto the sides of a fortune cookie, but I could extrapolate it out. It means so much more. So when they break the rules, I have to see them as a child first. When they throw a tantrum, I have to see them as a child first. And it's like, what are the ways that I can use that thing flexibly? And then, of course, with the educator, the goal is you want them to likely perform a wide range of relationship building repertoire. The evidence would be, you could collect a survey and see how the student relationships are. The evidence could be observations in that educator's classroom, and the measures of success would be, is each interaction between student and teacher respectful, mindful, compassionate? We'd really try and find those quality descriptors that we're looking for. And over time, instead of just saying to, your teachers, not your teachers, but in general, we need you to be, better with the kids or more mindful with the kids, you're really articulating what you mean and what we're going to observe and produce. And then really like what qualities we're looking for to get there. I think to expand this stuff to social and emotional learning is so needed. So I applaud your doing so with your learners and your teachers.
Yeah, well, and Adam, honestly, one of my big beliefs is that social emotional learning is all the learning that really matters. The kids can figure out all the knowledge they need to, and the place where we need to make the emphasis in our conversations with them and in our explicit teaching is on that social emotional stuff, because you can look up anything on the internet and some of it's true and some of it's not, but the reality is most of it doesn't even matter. And so teaching them how to be good human beings is what needs to be the priority. And so if it doesn't start there for me, then we're missing a huge part of what we should be doing in education.
Did you know that the original definition of educator in the dictionary, when it was first put there, was foster parent? Like in 1850 something, educator translated to foster parent. And it really just gives you moment for pause. Like, we've come really far from that original definition, you know?
Hmm. Yeah, I heard someone talking about it the other day that there's a Greek word that is something like that it to pull out or something like that.
Yep. To draw out. Yep. It's a sort of like a Buddhist conception. The original roots of educate come from educere, which is to draw out. And then parenthetically, and this is really important, and it really ties to map the path to mastery. It's to draw or lead out by example. And it's such a critical part that is missed. So yeah, you want to draw out the best, but how do you do that? By being your best self. So if you want your learners to be a certain way, how are you embodying that ideal yourself? And that's what Map the Path to Mastery is all about. Like I said, if you're going to assign somebody a task, you're going to say you need to be pious or argumentative or critical or engaging. Well, the path forward is to practice what you preach and model what you teach.
Yeah. So I did find the thing that I was looking for is from an article on eric.ed.gov, which is a collection of educational resources. And it says Educare and Educere is a balance possible in the educational system by Randall B. Bass. And he says Kraft noted that there are two different Latin roots of the English word education. They are educare, which means to train or to mold, and educere, meaning to lead out or draw out, as you said. While the two meanings are quite different, they are both represented in the word education. And so, what I think is fascinating is we're really going down a rabbit hole. Sorry, everybody, but we have
Hey, why?
more, gone more towards that lead, that train and mold, and less of the
Yeah.
out or draw out. And I think that is so fascinating. And what I love about the Empower method is that it asks us to draw out rather than to mold them into what we want. And I just think that that is really powerful. So anyway, you can find that Educare and Educere, EDUCERE, by Randall Bass, and it's you can get the full text on eric.ed.gov. So anyway, go check that out. It's really fascinating.
I love it. I mean, look, we had connected a little bit before the podcast began about how you were, considering opening up the school, and I actually had the opportunity to do that in New York. It's a place called School in the Square, and it's a really different place. It was really founded in the ethos that you're talking about, like really drawing out the best in every kid. And there's like a little video on the website that you can play, and it's like all about relationships first. It's not the content, it's the connections that really gets the learning process started. And that's why in the Empower method, which I want to be clear about one thing about the Empower method. It does honor the student's humanity. It honors all learners' humanity. But as soon as you get past that prime and orient stuff, which is cognitively rigorous, you get to the walkthrough and the explore. And that's where I think a lot of people who will be saying, oh, it can't just be touchy, feely, and emotional. That's where those people will find some great satisfaction, because we're drawing on the principles laid out by Anders Ericsson and the 10,000-hour rule research. It's just all about what it takes to not only foster deliberate practice, like Empower or anything else that you can become expert at over time. But what we're also realizing is that the breadth of your training predicts the breadth of your transfer. So if you keep on writing 5-paragraph essays and you never have the opportunity to write for a different kind of audience, that skill set doesn't really become transferable. So just as quickly as people learn Empower, I say, I want you to apply this to your personal training, to your workouts, to your seminary teaching, to your PD, to everything, because it transfers and you get better at it by just flexing it to whatever context you're in. And I think you don't have to choose. You don't have to choose between lessons that, kill the soul of kids but build them skills, and approach that honors their social emotional learning. No. The answer is the third way. It's the middle ground where you can honor both. And that's actually where the best rewards are.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, this has been a great conversation and I really appreciate it. I know that you have some resources for those who are listening if they'd like to explore this further. How do they get a hold of those things?
Absolutely. So that's at empoweryourteaching.com. And you're going to be able to download a canvas that has like a bunch of action steps kind of built in there, and that you can print it and throw post-its on it. You're also going to get a one-pager that summarizes a lot of what I was talking about today. And then if you are signed up at Empower Your Teaching, you're going to be getting sort of hits from us and the exercises that we're testing in schools, and tools for leaders in order to do this work with their teachers, because obviously it's the instructional leaders at the school who set the tone, and mapping the path and really doing the work, really doing the design work for the educators. And viewing staff PD is just another opportunity for you to hone your instructional prowess. It's just a great opportunity, and I love when educational leaders like take that on. So that's empoweryourteaching.com for a whole bunch of free stuff.
Excellent. So I definitely suggest you go there and get that empoweryourteaching.com. And the last question that I ask Adam is, what is one thing that a principal can do this week to be a transformative leader like you?
Oh, that's such a generous words. What I would say is I would start from the beginning. I would just ask educators for your upcoming unit, what's the gem? What's the goal? What are students going to be able to do independently without you by the end of the unit? What's the evidence that you're going to collect? Are they going to produce something, perform something, all of the above, maybe a portfolio? And then the measures of success. What are the qualities that we're going for? Is it convincingness with an argument, or engagingness with a narrative, or informativeness with an informational piece? But you'll find that, when educators can really speak to that gem, which is just the first step of the process, you can really see evidence of it in the classroom. And then here's the bonus. Ask the students, do they know what they're going for? Do they know what they're going to produce? And do they know how their work is going to be judged by themselves, their peers, and the expert community that they're taking part in? So I think that's a good start. 3 little questions. And that's what I'd like to see.
Excellent. Well, thank you so much again for being part of Transformative Principal. And a reminder, you can check out his resources for the Empower Method at empoweryourteaching.com. And you can get the show notes for this episode at transformativeprincipal.org.
Thanks, Jethro.